In our module introduction, we discussed how great PMs create leverage by using their product intuition to make great product decisions in the absence of detailed information. However, there are major challenges most PMs run into that hold them back from effectively developing product intuition. The major challenges are friction in establishing a regular feedback immersion habit, challenges in maintaining a direct understanding of the user, and overweighing the importance of recent feedback in their decision-making. To solve these challenges, we talked about how great PMs set up feedback management systems. These systems automate the collection and processing of feedback from multiple sources. In this lesson, we'll cover the first of those tools, feedback rivers. We'll explain what they are and how they help you build product intuition. First, let's talk about what a feedback river is. A feedback river is a system that consolidates your multiple feedback sources into a single channel. The channel is usually Slack or an email mailing list. For an example of a Slack-based feedback river, consider Wise. Feedback from their various feedback sources gets pushed into two separate channels, #HappyCustomer and #UnhappyCustomer, based on the user sentiment. In other words, NPS survey responses from promoters are sent to #HappyCustomer and responses from detractors are sent to #UnhappyCustomer. Similarly, customer support publishes happy user feedback to #HappyCustomer and unhappy feedback to #UnhappyCustomer. PMs skim the channels to get data points on what customers like and dislike, helping them develop their product intuition. For a mailing list-based river, consider LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Feedback from their various feedback sources is sent via email into a mailing list named lighthousefeedback@linkedin.com. Monthly NPS survey results are sent to the inbox with major feedback themes summarized and supported with verbatim quotes. They similarly piped in emails from the rest of their feedback sources, including questions from the sales team, reasons for lost deals from Salesforce, churn survey responses, amongst others. Everyone has access to this inbox, and PMs regularly skim through to see what the latest customer sentiment is, helping them develop their product intuition. Now let's talk about how feedback rivers build product intuition. The feedback river addresses the first major problem PMs have in developing product intuition: friction in establishing good feedback immersion habits. The feedback river removes both major friction points, pull relationship with feedback, and friction in accessing feedback. First, feedback rivers solve the pull relationship with feedback problem by changing the relationship to more of a push. Recall that most PMs have a pull-type relationship with their feedback, meaning they have to remember to check for feedback and intentionally pull it from a system. As a result, most PMs end up looking at their feedback sources fairly irregularly, which causes their feedback cycle time to length. Feedback cycle time is the time it takes between releasing a feature and reading user feedback on how it was received. When you have longer feedback cycle times, it becomes harder to intuit what users like and are looking for. The feedback river solves this problem by changing the traditional pull dynamic of feedback into more of a push dynamic. In other words, as feedback on a certain feature comes in, it automatically gets sent or pushed to the feedback river, where the PM notices there is fresh feedback to read through. This push dynamic removes the need for the PM to remember to look at feedback, and the steady flow of new feedback creates a regular trigger for the PM to go read it. To illustrate how powerful this difference is, let's consider a Slack example. First, imagine if a PM who's been launching features at Slack didn't have a convenient way to access feedback. After their initial feature launch, they might not remember to consciously go check on user feedback very often. As a result, they lose a lot of data points of what users like and dislike. Contrast this to if the PM at Slack was regularly checking their feedback river. They might not remember to specifically look for feedback on their launched features. However, because the feedback river is constantly streaming in user feedback, they have a high chance of casually colliding into some feedback that reminds them about what they've worked on. Second, feedback rivers help reduce friction in accessing feedback. Most PMs experience friction in accessing feedback from a variety of data sources. As an example, when a PM wants to access feedback from a new system, the PM has to get access to the system data, learn how to pull the system data, properly structure a query each time they want to pull the data, and format the query output into a more readable format. These moments of added friction result in busy PMs looking only at a limited set of feedback sources. However, looking at a limited set of feedback sources is a problem because each feedback source offers a unique perspective on this user. By looking at a narrow set of feedback sources, PMs miss a holistic view of the user. For example, help search queries and customer support tickets uniquely help you understand what people find unintuitive about your product. However, because pulling useful data from these sources of feedback tends to be highly manual, most PMs don't look at them. As a result, they miss key opportunities to make their product design more intuitive. To illustrate this, consider an example at Pinterest. Pinterest is a social media site focused on image sharing, saving, and organization. Before they did a redesign, Pinterest's name for saving images was called pinning an image. In other words, the button to save an image was labeled pin instead of save. This wasn't particularly intuitive to users, and as a result, many users didn't save images. This was problematic because Pinterest's algorithm generated engaging content based on the user's saved pins. When users didn't save pins, they were far less likely to be engaged. Had Pinterest been looking at help search queries, they could have spotted this problem early on. They might have seen lots of queries on how to save an image or what is pinning. Based on that finding, Pinterest could have determined they needed to rename the pin action to a more intuitive save action. FRs solve this feedback collection friction problem by centralizing all feedback into one easily accessible channel. Instead of needing to go into a tool like Google Sheets to dig up NPS survey results and a tool like Asana for customer tickets, data from both automatically feeds into the Slack channel, which they are already logged into. As a result, they only need to skim the feedback river to see the latest data pushes from both sources, and avoid having to log in and query each source. Additionally, feedback rivers also help PMs develop their product intuition by facilitating a more direct understanding of the user. In order to handle the scale, they start to rely on secondhand research. However, in doing so, they lose the direct voice of customer, meaning they lose a lot of detail on the user's context, their wants, and the intensity of their needs. FRs solve this secondhand exposure problem by preserving user verbatims from the feedback sources. User verbatims are the exact comments users put in their original feedback submissions. The feedback river directly passes the user verbatims along with each feedback input, giving the PM more first-hand exposure to the user and their needs. This first-hand exposure, in turn, enables the PM to better understand the severity and context of the user's needs, helping them develop their product intuition. So, to recap, feedback rivers help you remove the friction in developing a regular feedback immersion habit and get a more direct understanding of the user. In the next lesson, we'll cover how to set up your feedback river.